as we bring ourselves from the place of all that has gotten us here this morning to simply being here, being present. I invite us to sing our prayer as we settle into this time in which we gather with one another to consider those times when we lose sight of shore. No matter who we are, what we've done or what we've failed to do, whether we're single or partnered or somewhere in between, whether we're old or young or somewhere in between, whether our skin is yellow or red or brown or black or whites or some shade in between, whether we're at the top of the world and feel like the world's in our hand, or whether we feel that we're at rock bottom and there's no place else to go. Whether our spirits are soaring or we're struggling with sadness. Whatever we think or believe or want to believe or find ourselves unable to believe, we are welcome here. We are, each of us, whoever we are and wherever we come from and whatever it is that has brought us here, we are essential to this circle in which we are gathered this day to be community, whether we are here with one another in person or whether we are here with thanks to the internet. We also acknowledge that those of us who are gathered here in Edmonton are gathered on the lands in which the light and spirituality and traditions and cultures of our Indigenous people has shone for a very long time. And there have been times when that light has been nearly extinguished. And there have been times when that light has been painful for those of us who have settled in this land to witness. And there have been times when the light of our relationship has flickered and almost gone out. We light this candle. In gratitude for this land we share, whether we have come from Bhutan or England or Ireland or Scotland or Germany or Syria, wherever in the world we have come from or our families have come from. We come here together knowing that above us all are the stars. Beneath us is sometimes soil, sometimes water, sometimes air, always an element we can trust. And within us is the light of light. We gather to find what light it is we need. to live both when we feel firmly planted on the ground and when there's no land in sight. I want to invite us to gather here at the carpet, whether you're tall or small, whether you can get up and can't get down, or whether you can get down and can't get back up. Come and join us for a story we want to share with each other today. You must know that story. It's a good one. Yeah, it's a good story.
My brother has that.
Does he have it too?
I have it.
Great. And you too. Wonderful. And if you like it a whole lot, I see there's also a copy of it back on the table there today. You can have a look at it again. It's a great story about being scared, right? Being scared of a whole lot of things. In fact, Scaredy Squirrel is so scared of everything that he writes a little caution in the front of the book that says, "Warning, Scaredy Squirrel insists that everyone wash their hands with antibacterial soap before reading this book."
Mine said you have to brush your teeth.
Yours says something else. That's right. It's good. It's a story by Melanie Watt. And it's a story that starts like this. Scaredy Squirrel never leaves his nut tree. Pictures are up on the wall. He'd rather stay safe and familiar in his tree than risk venturing out into the unknown, because the unknown can be a very scaredy place for Scaredy Squirrel. Here's just a few things he's afraid of. What are they? Spiders, tarantulas, what else? Bees, poison ivy, germs, sharks, green Martians even. So he's perfectly happy to stay right where he is in his favorite nut tree, which of course is his favorite tree because he's never been anywhere else. Here's the advantages he sees of never leaving his nut tree. He's got a great view. He's got lots of nuts. He's got a safe place. And there's no what? Tarantula, spiders, poison ivy, all those things he's scared of. It is a spider, you're right. And then he's got another list. The disadvantages of never leaving the nut tree. Same old view, same old nuts, same old place. So, in Scaredy Squirrel's nut tree, every day is the same, whether it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. Everything's predictable, and best of all, everything's under control. Here's his daily routine. 6:45, he wakes up. 7 o'clock, he eats a nut. 7:15, he looks at the view. 12 noon, he eats a nut. 12:30, he looks at the view. 5 o'clock, he eats a nut. 5:31, he looks at the view. And 8 o'clock every night, he goes to sleep. Yeah, that's pretty boring. But let's say, just for example, that something unexpected did happen. You can rest assured that Squirrel is prepared. Here's just a few things that Scaredy Squirrel put in his emergency kit. What are they?
A parachute.
Your parachute, gloves, bug spray, sardines of all things, Band-Aids, a net, calamine lotion in case he falls in that poison ivy, a hard hat in case he falls on his head, antibacterial soap, you're right. So, here's what to do in case of an emergency according to Scaredy Squirrel. Step 1, you panic. Step 2, you run. Step 3, you get the kit. Step 4, you put on the kit. Step 5, you consult the exit plan. Step 6, exit tree if there is absolutely, definitely, truly, absolutely no other option. And he has a few little notes to self that are top secret. Exit note number 1, watch out for the green Martians and the killer bees in the sky. Note number 2, don't land in the river. If avoidable, use sardines to distract the sharks. Exit strategy number 3, look out for poison ivy and for tarantulas roaming the ground. Exit strategy number 4, keep in mind that germs are everywhere. And remember, if all else fails, playing dead is always a good option. Yeah, you're right. So, with his emergency kit in hand, Scaredy Squirrel watches. Day after day, he watches. Until one day, it was a Thursday, at 9:37 in the morning, a killer bee appeared. And Scaredy Squirrel jumps in panic, knocking his emergency kit out of the tree, and that was not part of the plan. And Scaredy Squirrel jumps to catch his kit, quickly regretting that idea, because the parachute is in the kit. But then something incredible happens. That's where you get the secret page in the book. He starts to glide. Scaredy Squirrel is no ordinary squirrel. He's a flying squirrel. Oops. What's on the screen at the back?
He lands in a bush.
He lands in a bush. I have to look up here now because it went black back there. He feels overjoyed, adventurous, carefree, alive, until he lands in that bush. He forgets all about that killer bee, not to mention the tarantulas, the poison ivy, the green Martians, the germs, and the sharks. And he plays dead. 30 minutes later, he's still playing dead. An hour later, he's still playing dead. 2 hours later, he's still playing dead. And finally, Scaredy Squirrel realizes that nothing horrible is happening. So he returns to his nut tree. But all this excitement has inspired him to make some drastic changes in his life. He's got a new routine now, new and improved. 6:45, he's going to wake up. 7 o'clock, eat a nut. 7:15, look at the view. And 7:37 a.m., he's going to jump out of the tree into the unknown. 9:45, he's going to play dead. 11:45, return home. 12 noon, eat a nut. 12:30, look at the view. 5 o'clock, eat a nut. 5:31, look at the view. And 8 o'clock, he's still going to go to sleep. And then there's a little PS. As for that emergency kit, Scaredy Squirrel is in no hurry to pick it up just yet. Look where it landed. In the poison ivy. Yeah, how did there get to be poison ivy right under his tree? Well, this is a great story about all those things we're scared of. And there's lots to be scared of in the world. There's lots of scary things out there.
Just like Scaredy Squirrel.
Just like Scaredy Squirrel, we're kind of like him. But look what happened when he could find a little courage underneath all that fear, and he could forget about his fears for a second and go for it. He had a great adventure. So this week, there's all those things that we're scared of the dark, scared of loud noises, scared of thunder, scared of storms, all those things that we could be afraid of. Let's remember Scaredy Squirrel. Let's remember the chance he took. Let's remember what he discovered. That was a whole lot bigger than his fear. We're taking a little break from Kids Spirit and Youth Cafe this summer, but there's lots of activities for you over on the table by the window here. So if you'd like to go over there and do some things, you're welcome to do that. Or if you'd like to stay in the circle with your family, you're welcome to do that.
Our poet this morning is Judy Sorum Brown. And I don't know anything about her other than this poem, but I'm imagining her as a swimmer or a sailor or a surfer. Certainly she is one, just from this one poem, I feel, who has experienced life. So this is her poem called Trough. There is a trough in waves, a low spot, where horizon disappears and only sky and water are our company. And there we lose our way, unless we rest, knowing the wave will bring us to its crest again, and there we may drown if we let fear hold us within its grip and shake us side to side and leave us flailing, torn, disoriented. But if we rest there in the trough, are silent, being with the low part of the wave, keeping our energy and noticing the shape of things, the flow, then time alone will bring us to another place where we can see horizon, see land again, regain our sense of where we are and where we need to swim. In the thoughts of this contemporary seeker, may we find wisdom for our living.
Good morning. This is the story that 3 of the 4 Gospels from late in the 1st century give us. This is the earliest version of that story. It's a story of Jesus and his friends making their way across the Sea of Galilee. On that day, when evening had come, Jesus said to them, "Let's go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd behind, the disciples took him with them in the boat, just as he was. Other boats were with them. A great gale arose, and the waves beat into the boat, so that the boat was already being swamped. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him up and said, "Teacher, do you not care that we're going to drown?" And he woke up and rebuked the wind. And he said to the sea, "Peace, be still." Then the wind ceased, and there was a dead calm. And he said to them, "Why are you afraid? Is there still nothing you can trust?" In the thoughts of this ancient story, may we find peace, wisdom for our living.
I've been captivated by the story of a team of British women who set 2 world records. They became the first female crew and the first 4-person team to row across the Pacific Ocean. It was in 2015 that this amazing crew completed a 257-day journey from the United States to Australia, rowing 24 hours a day in 2-hour shifts, each team of 2. It took them 9 months with 2 brief landings, one in Hawaii for a few days and another in Samoa. They were on the ocean 3 months longer than they anticipated. And they rowed more than 8,000 nautical miles, more than a third of the world's circumference, through gales and storms and waves that were as high as 3-story buildings, and temperatures up to 40 degrees centigrade, experiencing seasickness, rises and sunsets in the company of humpback whales and pods of dolphins and schools of mahi-mahi and 2 sharks that they affectionately named, who followed their boat for a few days. Here's a little taste of their journey.
There's an incredible insight to be gained, to know that you can fight and overcome anything that is thrown your way.
The main reason is to test myself, to see what I'm capable of.
The story of why we're here and why we're doing it for breast cancer. You think life's too short and you really do have to live it, and that's why we're doing what we're doing.
154 days to go.
We haven't seen the sunshine about a week.
You only have one life, so you might as well make the most of it.
Jesus is here!
The girls aren't going to break any records. They're actually going to establish records because this has never been done before.
The quote goes that you can never cross an ocean unless you have the courage to lose sight of the shore. And that's where your real achievements lie. There's a battery fire and we lost the MPPT box.
I believe that everyone has their own Pacific to cross.
It's hard to contemplate being in a 29-foot rowboat, rowing 12 hours a day for more than 8,500 nautical miles, both on and off course, given winds and currents over which they had no control, being vulnerably on the ocean for 257 days, losing sight of shore for a very long time, and discovering that every one of us has a Pacific to cross in our lives. We each have experiences of losing sight of shore and knowing the disorientation that comes when land disappears and we have to trust new ways to navigate. I think that's one of the lessons that gets lost to the storm in that first-century story our tradition tells us. We mistake the parable of the storm for a miracle of stilling the storm, and we miss the life lesson. Unlike those to whom this story was first told, we literalize their metaphors. We treat what they knew to be a highly symbolic story as though it were supernatural intervention into history. When this story makes its way from the oral storytelling tradition to be written down 40 years or so after Jesus of Nazareth was executed, those to whom this story was first given are living in the middle of a great storm. Jesus was not the first or the last resistor for the Romans to violently suppress. This story is being written to those who are living through Nero's persecution of the early Jewish Christian community during the time of the Jewish revolt against Rome. They were seeing Jerusalem seized and the temple destroyed by the empire. And into that violent and fearful time comes this story that's set in a northern pastoral region of the Galilee several decades earlier. As the ancient story goes, the friends of Jesus of Nazareth would have very good reason to be afraid. They had lived in the Galilee long enough to have a healthy respect for the elements. Sudden storms on that sea were legendary. Surrounded by hills and sitting deep in a basin, changes in pressure caused powerful winds to move across those waters. Every fisherman in the region would know from experience the danger posed by storms that come up suddenly on the Galilee. We're given this story that puts the friends of Jesus and Jesus in this day in which they are exhausted by the events that they are facing and the needs of the people around them. And Jesus has taken refuge in the stern of the boat and has fallen asleep. They wake him because everyone's effort will be needed to get this boat safely to shore. His response isn't what they expected. Is he speaking to the wind or is he speaking to his friends when he says, "Be at peace, be still"? Is he denying the danger or is he finding the courage to face it? As the story goes, in response to his confidence, both the storm within them and the storm without them was stilled. The wind ceased and there was a dead calm. And then he asked about their fear in a way that answers his own question. He says, "Why are you afraid? Is there nothing you can trust?" That's a great question. It's a great question that those first listeners of this story were living in the chaos of Rome exerting control. They had lost sight of land. They had lost sight of every scrap of security. The only thing that was certain was that nothing was certain. When this story was written, its readers were in the midst of 4 years of war that turned a bad situation in their lives into a brutal situation, that notched up the oppression by the Roman Empire into a full-blown occupation. That early Jewish Christian community who are hearing this story for the first time are not only living in the 40-year shadow of the execution of the one who founded their vision, but they are also living in the shadow of the execution of one of their most significant leaders, the execution of Paul, who had been crucified just a few years earlier by Nero. And for the Jewish community in Jerusalem, soldiers are breaching the walls of that beloved city they thought was impenetrable. and they're burning their way through the city to destroy their temple, ending the uprising in 70 of the Common Era. So this storm on the Galilee was a great symbol of the chaos those receiving this story were living. And they too, like the characters in the story, had every reason to be afraid. And every reason to ask, is there anything we can trust? Several years ago, I heard Marina Namat speak about her experience of being a political prisoner in Iran. She was held in Evin prison, that infamous prison in Tehran. She talked about her arrest and her torture and her detention as a 16-year-old girl, about what it was like to be indefinitely imprisoned as an adolescent, simply for having participated in demonstrations against the revolution that brought the Islamic Republic Party into power, unseating the Shah, and making Ayatollah Khomeini the supreme leader of the country. Her crime was freedom of thought and expression. She spoke about what it was to be forced to marry her interrogator, to convert to Islam, to be repeatedly raped by her captor. Like so many in Iran and in other tyrannies, she faced a firing squad, lived through the terror of others beside her being executed, and then the guilt of surviving and being granted freedom. She talked about what it is to live now without fear, having faced her greatest fear, her fear of death, walking out of prison at 18 years of age to live the rest of her life beyond the tyranny of fear, having come to know that kindness is natural and cruelty is deviant. But when kindness seems exceptional in our lives and cruelty seems normative, when prejudice seems pandemic and corruption seems endemic, despair can easily become the captain of our ship. This is our experience in our personal lives, in our life as a society, in our global lives and identities. There is much to fear, and sometimes it seems there's little to trust. We're very well acquainted with the trough in the wave. We know that low spot where the horizon disappears and we lose sight of land. And it's easy to lose our way as a species, as a nation, as planetary beings, as individuals. And when we lose sight of land, when we're crossing whatever Pacific life gives us, we can see that environment as hostile, or we can see it as an invitation to do something we've never done before. Like Scaredy Squirrel, it's an opportunity to trust ourselves to our environment. Like the crew on the Galilee, who were mirroring the Jewish survivors of Roman violence between the years 66 and 70 of the Common Era. We can do something we've never done before. Like the crew crossing that Pacific on a 29-foot boat. We can trust the inner compass of our wisdom and our compassion, and know that it is telling us true north. We can find inside us new lands to discover, ground that we can trust even in the middle of a storm. And we can trust that the trough will bring us to the crest again, where we will see land beyond us and regain our sense of where we are and where it is we need to swim. We can be overwhelmed by our sense of disorientation, that there's no land in sight, nothing with which to mark our way, or we can discover there are other ways to navigate, because the stars are still in the sky, and the sun still rises in the east and sets in the west. And if we look around, we're not alone in the boat. And just like in the world of that story, there are other boats on the sea. And we can discover the buoyancy of a courage we didn't know we had. And today's another day to ask, why am I afraid? What do I need to trust? Part of what brings us together week by week as spiritual community is to find ways to strengthen our intention, to find courage beyond our fear, to find ways to live in a fearful time. Much like the friends of Jesus, who asked their teacher to teach us to pray. We come together to say words that speak something of our intention, of how it is we would pray our way in the world, how it is we would live in the world. And so we offer these words, patterned on the form of the prayer of Jesus, with words that come from our time and our context, and we offer them together as a way of strengthening our intentions. We embrace the sacredness of life with awe and reverence, and we commit ourselves to work for a more fair and just world. We seek to live with deep intention, that all may have enough for today, as we let go of the guilt and regret that encumbers us, and embrace relationships of trust. May forgiveness open a way to freedom. We long to live examined lives, inspired to find meaning and purpose in our living, working with what is, to bring about the world as we would wish it to be. May it ever be so. Amen. I want to express our gratitude to musicians who are helping us through these summer months. Katie, who was on the piano with us last week and will be here again at the end of the month, and Eric, who's here today and again next week. Thank you both so much for giving us the gift of music and helping our regulars have a break this summer, and for being with us and bringing the energy that you each bring to the piano. So thank you both so much. We want to thank you for all the ways that you support us with your time, your effort, your financial support. And again, on the screen, you see ways that you can support us financially. I invite you to do that in ways that you're able to do. And we want to thank you for all the ways that you make a difference with your presence, with your energy, and with the entrustment of financial resources that you give us to manage and utilize in the community and well beyond in important ways that speak to the values that we hold dear as this community of faith. As we make our way from this time with one another, we go knowing that even in the deepest darkness, the light within us is not extinguished. The light in one another's eyes is not extinguished. The light of our tradition and so much wisdom of enduring spiritual traditions is there for us, and we are there for one another, come what may. And so through our laughter and tears, we go with one another, seeking to find land within us, even when we lose sight of shore.